It's the week of Christmas, and a beautiful one at that. And this is Business Morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. Last week was a busy one in the world of business, and there were a lot of stories out there that has to do with the economy. The inflation numbers for November came out indicating a continuous rise on inflation, particularly food inflation. Inflation number year on year is currently at 14.89% and most likely will cross 15% threshold by December. Food inflation is as high as 18.30%. Now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, non-performing loans in the Nigerian banking sector declined by 42.4 billion naira in 3 months. Nigeria's capital importation as of third quarter 2020 stood at $1.46 billion, increasing by 12.86% from second quarter of 2020, and it declined by 74.03% compared to third quarter of 2019. Again, the Senate passed the Finance Bill 2020. The bill seeks to amend 12 acts, which include the Capital Gains Tax Act, Companies Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund, and so on. There are about 12 of them. And then the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee shared a total of 601.1 billion naira to the federal, state, and local governments, and of course the agencies. Also, the federal government finally reopened the borders last week, but 4 of them with Benin and Niger, and promised to reopen the other border points at the end of December. Good news, isn't it? And finally, the World Bank approved Nigeria's request for a $1.5 billion loan as budget support and to help cushion the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the country's revenue. Here is what the World Bank said. Nigeria is at a critical point, and that's the reason for the approval of the loan. The statement partly reads, with a sharp fall in oil prices as a result of COVID-19, the economy is projected to contract by over 4% in 2020, plunging the country into its deepest recession since the 1980s. Government revenues could fall by more than $15 billion this year, and the crisis will push an additional 5 million Nigerians into poverty in 2020. Well, I didn't say this, the World Bank did. Now let's bring in an economic policy analyst and the CEO of Espera Global Corporation, Dr. Glenn Prince Abi. Thank you very much, Dr. Abi, for joining us on the program. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Now, here is what we need to know about this $1.5 billion facility to Nigeria. The World Bank delayed its approval because of concerns over some critical reforms, as the bank believes that Nigeria has not shown enough commitment towards realizing them. And some of these key reforms include the flexibility and unification of the exchange rate, removal of fuel subsidy, and an increase in electricity tariffs. So, are we on the right path now?
Well, in terms of reforms, I think there's a whole lot that our country has to make, in order to, to make us properly prepared to stimulate the economy. Essentially, certain components of the reforms have been mentioned, but there are still a whole lot of activities, a whole lot of areas where we need to improve the capacity of the economy to actually grow in terms of stimulation, because at the point where we are, because the World Bank loan is actually meant to stimulate the economy, the loan is split into 2 principal components. The Nigeria Cares aspect, which has to do with COVID-19 action, economic stimulus recovery program for results, and then the aspect that talks about the state's fiscal accountability and sustainability program for results. So under these 2 components of the loan, standing at $750 million, the first, and then the second $750 million. So if we look at, for instance, the the aspect of the federal government, which has to do with the Nigeria Cares aspect of post-COVID-19 action recovery program for recovery, for results. We're looking at economic stimulating programs. So I will look at that. I'll look at that in terms of our preparedness to utilize effectively the loan. We'll be examining that, okay? And then also we'll look at the aspect of the states, the Nigerian states, the fiscal accountability, sustainability program, where the state's capacity for transparency, the state's capacity for IGR generation, will also be examining that, okay? So as we go on in the discussion, I will shed light on that and see what really needs to be done at the federal level in terms of true preparedness and capacity to very effectively utilize the loan, and also the state level in terms of the state's readiness, state's level of readiness also to utilize the loan in a way that is particularly economic stimulating, that actually can achieve the result. Because first of all, we have to remember also that World Bank's program is based on what is called the country partnership framework, which is drawn to cover a 4-year program, 2021 to 2024. So under the 4-year program, under the country partnership framework, the World Bank looks at what can, how the bank can be, leveraged to stimulate economic growth in a way that is sustainable, in a way that's inclusive. So we'll look at what the Nigerian government needs to do to fulfill this aspect of the strategy of the country partnership program. So these are areas that I think we can explore further as we discuss. Thank you.
Sure. Now, talking about utilization, yes, borrowing, they say, is not bad. But what is important is what you use the borrowed money to do. Yes, World Bank says the crisis will push an additional 5 million Nigerians into poverty by the end of this year. Now, you talked about, sharing what you think the state, the federal, and the local government can actually do in this regard. So are you worried about how these borrowed monies can be utilized? So what's your suggestions? How do you think the state governments, the federal government, the local governments can actually, and there has to be a synergy in doing this?
All right, I may not use the word worry, because worry actually signifies a level of pessimism. But let me rather talk about my recommendations, what I think should be done. Okay, because under the Nigeria Cares program of the COVID-19 Action, Response and Economic Growth Stimulation Program for Results of the loan, which is $750 million, I want to, for the federal government to look at aspects, because under that there are 4 components. There is the FADAMA program, which is meant to be further funded. But I observed that, the state governors all insisted, that even state governors in the South insisted that the FADAMA program should cover them. But I think that is a bit of an aberration, because the FADAMA program is a strategy designed to stimulate irrigation, particularly in areas of the country, in particular, northern part of the country, where access to water is a bit of a challenge. So the FADAMA is targeted at a lot of irrigation. So the governors all insisted, in the South, all insisted that, they should all be included in FADAMA program under this loan and all that. Well, one part of the problem we have in Nigeria is that there's always some level of political consideration, the quota mentality that we have. So in terms of strategy, I think spreading the loan to cover FADAMA also for the southern states, southern states across the country, I think is a bit of an aberration. But anyway, then we look at the aspect of the conditional cash transfer. This is one of the elements that are covered, for inclusive economic, inclusive for social spending, okay? And then the federal government, of course, we know, has carried out this conditional cash transfer for about 5 years. I want to look at a situation where under this loan, and even under other programs. It can move from the core tactical to practical strategy of leveraging the relationship, the database, the framework that has been established for the most vulnerable and the poorest of our communities to start to be active participants in the economy. So I expect that there should be a strategy that now goes beyond just giving them 5,000 or a cash, to enabling them to be active contributors to the economy. So it means that there has to be practical steps to engage advisors, community advisors and consultants who can go down there, start to interact with them in a way that enables them to start to do business, no matter the level of micro involvement that they are involved in. So that will stimulate more of, that would achieve the inclusive economic growth that we're talking about at their level, leveraging the conditional cash transfer as an existing framework. There are other aspects, for instance, community development is also there, town halls and markets and all that, and then health institutions. Now, regarding community development, I would say that the aspect of town halls may not actually be a crucial priority, because it is, while it's a good and important infrastructure in the community, at the community level town halls, but in terms of urgency, in terms of, okay, you took a loan, just, and part of it is to build town halls, I think that that the thinking there is a bit weak. We can look more rather at involving communities in businesses and all that, because the fundamental strategy of the country partnership program, or the country partnership framework of the World Bank, is actually stimulating economic growth and the inclusiveness and all that. So all aspects of economic growth enhancing activities, what should be the core focus. So more plans need to be carried out, even before we start to spend the money in the system. We have to just look at that as well. And then, of course, for the state governments, they need to also do that, because there is $750 million also shared among them across the board at the state government level. So they have to see how actual economic activities can be boosted with that, rather than using it to fund a recurrent expenditure and things like that. And now that brings me to the aspect of Nigeria's challenge in terms of what we need to do vis-a-vis fiscal consolidation. Now, over time and space, the bilateral agencies, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, have always advanced that fiscal consolidation programs, fiscal consolidation strategies must focus on revenue-generating capacity of governments, of developing economies. For me, what I observe here is that our revenue generation is the principal drawback in our fiscal consolidation. We are weak in the area of revenue generation, and then we are also weak in the area of managing soaring recurrent expenditure. Now, we are borrowing, excellent idea, but then we are borrowing also against a challenge where we have about $55 billion shortfall in our revenue. That's through oil and all that. $55 billion, 77%. Shortfall in our revenue generation, particularly from crude oil. So it means also that to make sense of this, to make sense of the activities that we're carrying out, it means that we have to strongly visit our recurrent expenditure framework. I want to see the federal government coming up with recurrent expenditure containment strategies that can be tested, that can be put through a litmus test to see whether there's clear discipline. And I fear that has not been done. I fear, too, that might not be done because of political expediency, because much of our recurrent expenditure activities are geared towards managing the political system and geared towards satisfying political priorities and imperatives rather than core economic priorities. For instance, if we go through the news, go through all the headings of the newspapers, either online, on hard copy and all that, you discover that 75 to 85% of news items are purely political. We don't discuss economy. We're in a very critical situation as a country, and then we're not discussing the economy. We have the opposition, whose statements are always political. I would expect a more involved set of activities by the opposition where they come up with strategies, core strategies in terms of economy and all that, rather than just commentary about, oh, this is not done, this is not good, and things like that. There has to be more involvement in economic revitalization across the board by the federal government, by the state government, and also at the local government level. State governors should start to set very tough agendas for local government management executives, the chairman and their councillors, to come up with strategies for core economic growth in the local government areas. In that way, they will be able to also fulfill their IGR element, the IGR component of the state fiscal sustainability transparency program for results, which they're borrowing, with the money being borrowed for them for. So in that way, we can actually improve our response system to activate, stimulate the economy at a critical moment such as we're in.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Abi, we really don't have much time now, but, you know, now we're beginning to see, it seems we're beginning to have what we will call a second wave of this coronavirus. And we can see even in the Western world, there's been some kind of lockdown, particularly in the UK. Yes, vaccine is in the horizon, but then, I don't know, are we prepared? What should we be doing now to avert yet another lockdown and to ensure that we actually get out of this present recession?
Well, at the beginning of the virus outbreak, sometime in the first quarter of the year, we had, you and I, we had a couple of interactions on this in this very studio on this, and had indicated that you asked a question whether, at that time, whether the reactions to the coronavirus outbreak was disproportionate. And I strongly argued that this was actually disproportionate, grossly disproportionate. And it's because of the disproportionate nature of reaction and response to the outbreak of the pandemic that the world's economy is in this state now. So I think that an overconsciousness and therefore a lockdown of economic activities, an overconsciousness of the pandemic and a complete lockdown of economic activities does not actually, result in any reasonable level of protection of our economy. So we should look at how we can maintain all the protocols that are required, while at the same time allowing the economy to move on, social activities, economic activities to move on. Because if we do carry out that kind of lockdown in Nigeria, for instance, is going to worsen things, because we have seen the effect of it. Now, of course, in Europe, lockdowns are occurring, full lockdowns are occurring and all that. And we can also imagine the implication of that on the Nigerian economy, because automatically it means that our oil production, oil exports will be low, because the industrial activities in the countries that import from us are what enable our crude oil prices our crude oil revenues to keep flowing in. So all of these are big threats. So I would say, very, very briefly, that the main thing that we need to do as a country is actually visiting economic activities, production activities. It is only production activities that are accelerated, production activities that are made more robust, production activities that actually can spread to all strata of society in a very strategic and measurable way that can actually prevent us from being so, susceptible to such economic shocks as what we are facing now. So there has to be more strategy by the federal government in terms of seeing how production activities, economic activities can be stimulated across the board. And the state governors also should fold their sleeves and see how production activities, of course, can be very much stimulated. Every activity, every spending by government, federal, state, should look at what economic activities this spending generate for us. So every spending should be tied to that. And then again, there must be clear transparency in terms of expenditure management, recurrent expenditure. If we have not visited recurrent expenditure, no dime, for instance, no dime has been reduced in our recurrent expenditure, even though we are facing very serious challenges, we are entering recession and things like that. So there must be clear evidence of readiness through managing the ever-rising spiraling recurrent expenditure. So there must be the political readiness, the political will to contain recurrent expenditure.
All right.
That should balance what we're doing by way of fiscal consolidation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prince Abi. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Well, I'm not sure if I'll see you before Christmas, but I hope to talk to you before Christmas, and I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas. Be well, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank you very much. I wish you the very same thing. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the new year, too, if we don't get to see again in the studio. Thank you.
We will see. Right. And after over a year, Nigeria reopens its borders. Nasima shares its perspective on this next. It's good news for many businesses as the federal government announced the immediate reopening of the land borders. The borders were shut in an effort to stop smuggling of goods into the country. Now that the borders have been reopened, what next? The Director General, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Mines and Agriculture, Ambassador Ayo Olukoni, is here with me. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming on our show. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes, when that border reopening was announced, Nasima released a statement welcoming, this move. So what was most exciting for your chamber about all of this?
Well, I think the most exciting thing was that we had called for reopening of the borders for obvious reasons. We're not oblivious of the security dimensions and the problems, but we thought that really these borders cannot be just closed like that. As a country that has a significant impact on the economy of West African states, and even beyond that, we thought that no. And we've been consistently calling for a review for the opening of the borders, tightening the borders in terms of the security arrangement. And when the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zainab Ahmad, announced that the committee has been formed, which she was chairing, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs and a few other very important ministers and ministries as well, and hinted that the borders will be opening. We also released a statement to welcome that announcement, and we called quickly for reopening. So eventually, when the borders were reopening, as we said, okay, fine, this is it. Now we can start talking properly, because it has impacted a lot on our members across the country and on the nation's economy. And we are of the view that COVID-19, the crisis of recession, that the vision of reopening, the vision of quickly coming out of recession in the first quarter of 2020, just like the minister and very other people have said.
First quarter of 2021, I guess.
Oh, sorry, 2021 is an indication that, look, this is one of the important strategic options to be able to achieve that objective.
Yeah, but the border was closed just to stop smuggling activities. Then one would wonder, did that really achieve the purpose?
Well, and that's why we are indeed glad that the whole gamut of the whole issues, policy position about reopening also addressed the question and issues of effectively policing the borders.
Absolutely.
Now, you've just thrown out the question. This morning, I was also on NTA, Good Morning, with the minister, and she said that the full report of lessons learned and for the future and the gains of closing the borders will be released very soon. And I think it's a report all of us should look at, properly dissect, and see what are the lessons learned. Because the question and issue now is sustainability of the borders which have been opened without jeopardizing the crisis and the problems of security, and also the question and issues of smuggling, effectively tackling them. Because those items which are banned are still banned. They're not, in terms of rice and all that.
The rice, yes, the poultry.
So to be
stuff,
able to achieve the main objective of reopening that border, of the land borders which are reopened, I think the report which the Honourable Minister referred to this morning, and that it will be available on the website and in the public, will be very, very interesting and very, it will be very good for all of us.
While we wait for that report, now you talked about, now that the borders have been reopened, it's important to ensure good policing of that border. Now, we have agencies like the customs, the immigration. How equipped do you think these agencies are to be able to police these borders? Because it's not all about closing the borders.
Yes, my take is that when the decision to reopen was all these factors to capacitate and make these agencies more and more effective has been put in place. That is our expectation, that the respective agencies, your customs, immigration, all the other agencies that all there at the border have been properly equipped to be able to effectively now police our borders. That is our expectation. That is our hope, and we sincerely hope that, and that's why we are saying, we are referring to the report itself, which would, of course, have done a proper analysis in terms of all the issues that are involved, have taken in place. And of course, I'm sure that the respective agencies too themselves will also realize this is the time to prove that indeed we are up to the task. Right. I think that is there, and especially like what we talked about, the question of getting ready for the AFCTA too as well. Is all part of the wrap. Is all part of the package.
Coming at a time when the AFCTA is about to take off January 1, and just wondering how ready our business is. Yes, I can see you in your local fabric.
Yes,
are you advocating made in Nigeria products?
Well,
yes, my former guest talked about production. It's not about lockdown. Yes. We have to produce. How ready are we? How ready are your people?
I think the first thing to say is this, that the AFCTA is a marathon. It is not a 100-meter dash. And don't forget, this is an agreement which dates back, the vision goes back as far, close to 1963. 1963 to now is almost, how many decades is that, itself? So it's a long-term vision coming at this particular period. We are glad that our forebearers, even our Prime Minister, Balewa, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, spoke about it. Then the Abuja Treaty, 1991 Abuja Treaty, was also the reference point as far as this is concerned in terms of a continental free trade agreement. So here we are. But like I said, it is not a 100-meter dash. It is a marathon. And then we should start getting ourselves ready. We were just joking that I'm into fabric. One of the things I would like to also let us know is that the National Action Committee on the AFCTA has been working assiduously, headed by Francis Fernatogu, in terms of the respective areas, the pharmaceuticals, manufacturing. Throughout last week, we were all involved in it to assess our strength, SWOT analysis, our strengths, our weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've looked at that. And the thing is to say that, listen, as the Chambers of Commerce, we are also working closely with our members to stand ready to be part of it. And I'm sure Nigeria can contest, can compete effectively in terms of the question of competitiveness. The manufacturing sector, we all know the prices and problem. It means that government has to make sure to resolve the crisis of infrastructure, energy, and all that. But beyond that, I'm wearing this fabric. This is an ethnic fabric in terms of the Nigerian fabric anywhere in the world. I served in the foreign service for 35 years. Anywhere, anytime you come on with Nigeria, and you know the Nigerian women with their gele, of course, you know what happens. The point I'm making is that we do have opportunities in fabric like this. I remember about 2 years ago, Ogun State government launched the authentic Ogun dress, Adire, to be able to bring it up to standard. What does that mean? It means that it is possible for us within the context of the AFCTA as far as competitiveness, pushing this into the market.
Then the issue has always been, how do you ensure the value chain, getting it right in terms of value chain?
The first thing to say is that I'm very fond of the saying of Mario Cuomo that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. You must, if you campaign, AFCTA is good, we want to be part of it, but you must have an understanding of the AFCTA. And that's why one of the things we're doing is to be able to help our members have an understanding, the respective, especially also the organized private sector. Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, NASME, NASI, as well as NECA, in terms of people reaching out to their members, and also working closely with the National Action Committee on the FCTA. But it is important to recognize that it is a private sector agreement between government, but it's going to be run by the private sector. And I must say that, indeed, honestly speaking, as we speak, the Nigerian banks are already de facto implementing the FCTA. I served in Nairobi for about 4 years, 2003, 2007, as a Nigerian diplomat, and there was hardly any Nigerian banks. Fast forward to this particular period, you have many of the banks. Don't let me mention that so that you don't charge the banks for me.
I'll charge you
for them, but they are there as far as that is concerned.
Yeah.
You know. Nigerian products are also out there in various areas in terms of. So what we need to do is to capacitate our respective members, and especially in NASIMA, this is one of the things we want to do. I'll give you a good example of the Nsukka yellow pepper, which about 300 farmers in Nsukka are brought together by the Nsukka Chambers of Commerce to be able to capacitate them to be able to produce the famous Nsukka yellow pepper in terms of being able to push it into the international market. Of course, the African market is also in vision as far as this. I'll give you a good example. Right not too far away from you here in Ilupeju, there's a company that's into glass blowing, and they're also producing coffee. Coffee as in coffee, hybrid coffee. And they are saying that they have problems and challenges meeting the Nigerian market in terms of this coffee, in terms of the coffee itself. And they said they are now looking at the future, especially in context of the possibility of competing with Ethiopian coffee, Kenyan coffee. And Ethiopian coffee and what it in terms of the Starbucks chain. So that means that here in Nigeria, we do have companies like that can compete effectively and also be part and parcel of the AFCTA in terms of. And they said they've gone to acquire lands, about 2 acres across the place, But in context of the FCTA, I think one of the areas we should also focus on as the SMEs. Because if we can capacitate that SMEs to be able to trade effectively, to be able to produce in terms of what they can produce, and you mentioned the value chain, this is the time to now thinking beyond agriculture.
Absolutely.
We should now go into agribusiness. Agribusiness. And I'm sure the president of the AFD, the African Development Bank himself, Dr. Additional, also mentioned that this is the future. So in context of, this is the time to move beyond just agriculture. As we get ready for the FCT, we should look at the agribusiness and the respect and the value chains that will come with it.
Now, the rule of origin, when we're talking about this treaty, this deal, rule of origin is very important.
Of course.
Your members, do they really understand it? Because it's important. And what's your chamber doing to make them...
Of course, the rule of origin, like we said, in context of business, trade, export, and things like that, perhaps you can say it is the heart of the matter. And should also be a matter of the heart. I repeat that. It is the heart of the matter and also a matter of the heart. Implicitly, because if you throw that out of the window, then everything is scattered. So what we do is to regularly, of course, educate our members in terms of... we are part of the ETLS committee, the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme. And then we do have that committee that looks at products, which we are sending out in terms of ensuring that, yes, they conform with the old question of issues of certificate of origin, And it's going to be a key and very important part of the AFCTA, because if we don't nail that in, then, I mean, we're just opening our borders for goods from different part of the area. It's going to be a very important part of it. And of course, I'm sure the National Action Committee on the FCTA itself also recognizes that.
Now,
And,
Ambassador, before I let you go, now, are you concerned about this new wave of coronavirus?
Yes, of course. Of course.
And the possible implication it might just have on even the takeoff of the AFCFTA?
Of course, we are the chambers of commerce. We are very concerned about that. We've in fact even in anticipation issued a statement to that effect. Is that, look, COVID-19 resurgence is real. It's an existential real for all of us. That means that we should all the protocols in terms of health and safety, the guidelines. We must effectively that we must. But the lockdown, no.
No lockdown.
No lockdown. But implicitly, me and you individuals must take action as far as the question of the safety guidelines, which has been, Lagos State is, of course, is also saying, and of course, I think perhaps we should also appeal to our respective churches. While Christmas and New Year, they should please kindly keep that in wrap. Let us still do online thing. I think God is hearing prayers online too as well.
And if I may ask you, Ambassador, are you traveling for Christmas?
I'm around.
You're around.
I'm around.
But you have to travel.
Yes, I'm around.
Yeah, curtailing the traveling is also part of it.
Definitely not traveling outside the country, but in here too as well.
But within the country, travel from state to state should also be restricted in all of those. That should also be part of it.
People should also mask up, wash hands, and all the safety guidelines which has been rolled out by the government.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. And as you travel, be safe. I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Of course, I wish all of us a Nigerian very pleasant period in terms of period. But please let us stay very safe.
We'll be safe.
And
we'll
keep to the
continue
regulations.
to be safe, absolutely, so that we can see the year 2021.
2021. And
yes.
keep to the CDC requirements.
Few
as well.
days to
Yes.
2021. And I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the good work Channel is doing. Communication impact on all aspects of development. You are doing good work in that particular area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Ambassador.
much for having me. Thank you.
Okay, Eddie, you're there on board. Well, it's Christmas week, and the fast-moving consumer goods should be doing it this week.
Good morning, Jimmy. Well, I'm here with you, and we'll see how that goes. Last week, the consumer goods sector was up by over 3%. So hopefully, with just 4 trading days left before Christmas, we'll see some more activity on that counter. But speaking about activity now, Jimmy, the market saw the largest weekly gain in 5 weeks. The market was up 7.46% at 36,804.75 points. Now, we saw investors' interest, especially foreign investors' interest in shares of Airtel Africa. And then we saw some bargain hunting in Dangote Cement and MTN Nigeria and some banking stocks. So that also helped in pushing the index up. Now, however, activity level was lower compared to the previous week. Volume was down by about 16%. Value was down about 15%. And all of that was traded in 20,660 deals. Of course, all the sectors were positive, with banking, consumer goods, industrial goods, insurance, all of them posting gains. But let's talk to Rotimi Fakayejo, a stockbroker, to have more sense about what's going to be happening this week. Good morning, Mr. Fakayejo. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Lydian.
With just 4 trading days left before the Christmas holiday, what should we be expecting from investors this week?
We've seen what happened the week before. The market was down. Last week, the market rebounded, which signaled the beginning of a new rally that will usher us into the year 2021. And I think we saw that gaining momentum all through the week. Though, as mentioned earlier, activity was low in terms of volume and value traded. But be that as it may, I think all that may change this week. Aside from us seeing a trajectory in the price movement and also the OSHA index, we are most likely also to see an increased volume of transaction and ultimately value that will be traded. And as such, I believe strongly that investors who have been doubting about the what we have been seeing in the market from the time from about August to date. I think they are now going to at least put up more confidence and come back into the market. So we expect that for this week, we are likely to see a better movement than what we saw. And looking at the market this morning, I think it's quite a game changer. The market is already doing about 1.77%, courtesy of Dangote Cement that is on full bid at this time. That's gained about 20 naira 90 kobo, adding a total value of about 360 billion to the market capitalization. So other securities are definitely going to pick up, and we're going to see the market turning out better than what we have seen since the beginning of the year.
Mr. Fakaijo, thank you for your input on the program. We will be looking forward to that Christmas gift in the markets, and I'm loving the way the market has started this morning. Thank you for your input on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Jimmy, you've heard how the market is moving this morning already, so I'm joining you in that your optimism.
Yeah. Talking about that Christmas gift, that gift started last week when Santa came to the market, and I hope Santa remains there. I hope this new wave of coronavirus is not going to push it
hopefully
into hibernation or whatever. Let's just hope for the best. Thank you, Eddie. Well, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we talk to Juliana. And of course, I'll come back to you, Eddie. It's not a Christmas cheer for people in the UK as new variant of coronavirus is giving room for another lockdown. Well, let's talk to Juliana in London. Good morning, Juliana. I hope you had a great weekend despite this new wave of strain of COVID-19. And UK seems to have plunged into Christmas chaos as travelers are stopped from traveling because of this prevalence of a new variant of coronavirus. And of course, today, Boris Johnson is to chair an emergency meeting and a sneak peek into what the PM might say at this meeting.
Goodness me, Chimaze, so much is going on in London, in England and across the UK. It's been a pretty intense 48 hours and the news is still developing, so I'll give you as much information as I can. Of course, on Saturday afternoon, Prime Minister Boris Johnson had a televised address with the two chief scientists here in England talking about this new strain of COVID-19. A strain that seems to be spreading a lot more quickly and rapidly than the COVID-19 that we had been used to. Britain actually had to inform the World Health Organization, and there were no means about it. Within a couple of hours, the entirety of London and the southeast was plunged into tier 4 from midnight on Saturday, which means just hours before people were getting ready to fill up their Christmas shopping, that hairdressers, salons, the hospitality sector, pubs, bars, all had to come to a complete standstill, affecting the lives of 16 million people. And now one of the discussions that Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be having with senior cabinet ministers today is about the lockdowns. Now, we know several countries across Europe and the world. I believe just before I stepped into the studio, Canada became the latest country to close its borders to the UK, have closed their borders. But France has gone that one step further. They've actually stopped their ports. So the ports are now closed. Hauliers can now no longer come in and out of the UK. So they cannot travel between Kent and Calais. This is a major serious concern for Britain, no less because we already had issues, which I've discussed on this programme with you severally, about Brexit stockpiling, the usual Christmas rush. But now food is going to be a huge concern because French hauliers are saying if they cannot get back into Calais, then they will not be crossing into the UK. So there are major concerns. Not only will the Prime Minister be speaking to cabinet ministers, he's also going to be speaking to the big heads at the major 4 retailers and the grocers just to find out whether or not people can get food before Christmas. It's a huge nightmare. And as you can imagine, it has affected the lives of so many people. So many borders are closed. People are not travelling. And it's pretty stark compared to this time last week where hundreds of thousands of people were shopping for Christmas, and effectively everybody's been placed into a lockdown less than 1 month after the November 2nd lockdown.
Now the pound is already taking a hit as the borders close to UK. How's the equities market behaving this morning?
Not great. As you can imagine, it's a sea of red across European top indexes. The FTSE 100 opened sharply lower, down by about 2%. And it's because the FTSE 100 obviously has so many internationally focused companies that it's not as low as it should be, because the pound has dipped. The pound, I believe, has dipped about 2% against the US dollar this morning, at about 1.8% against the euro. Some of the major casualties are British Airways owner IAG. Their shares have fallen 17.5%. That's because, of course, there are so many countries that have now cancelled flights. It's illegal to travel out of Britain at the moment. We've also seen sharp declines in Rolls-Royce. That's the aero engine maker. Their shares are down 14%. Premier Inn owner Whitbread, their shares are down 6.7%. Along with Canada as well. We've also just heard from Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. They've also announced that they're closing their borders to UK travel. So it's not great. And obviously, we haven't mentioned the B word, which is Brexit, which is, of course, causing even more uncertainty for investors this morning.
Yeah, a double whammy for Boris Johnson as Brexit talk miss another deadline. Talks are set to continue today between negotiators. Which way for Britain?
Well, I'm not a betting lady, Chimezie, but if you ask me, it seems as if we're certainly heading for a no deal. In fact, sources close to those negotiations in Brussels, which were taking place yesterday between Lord David Frost, Britain's chief negotiator, and Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, they've come out and said it's still really difficult. We've been speaking about it for months and months, but fisheries and the state aid and the level playing field remain the levels of contention. But, of course, now we've got this new wild strain of COVID-19, and it has brought with it calls for these discussions to come to an end. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, she's been one of the most vocal voices or critics against negotiations continuing. She put on Twitter this morning saying it would be unconscionable to compound this new strain with Brexit negotiations. At least this Brexit transition period due to end in 10 days must be continued. We know Boris Johnson has been completely against that. In fact, he's put it in law that we must leave the EU by the 31st of December. But with all this reckoning happening at the moment and just 10 days to go, it is looking increasingly unlikely that Britain will be able to strike a trade deal. What we're expecting potentially is that there will be a gentleman or ladies' handshake at the end of this transition period for talks to continue into January. But yes, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain's in tray is pretty full this morning.
We'll see how that goes. I'll talk to you later in the day, Juliana. In the meantime, please stay safe.
Thank you.
Well, Eddie, you see what's happening in the UK. I hope that doesn't dampen our market out there.
Well, hopefully it doesn't dampen our market, because if you look at it, COVID itself in Nigeria did not have so much impact on the market. So hopefully, that wouldn't dampen the rally we're on right now. But just before we look at the debt and currencies market, the unlisted securities market ended the week negative. It was down 1.49%. at 722.82, while the market cap was at 537.27 billion naira. We saw about 5.37 million units worth 94.52 million naira traded in 15 deals. And just before we go to the bond market, let's talk a bit about the foreign exchange market. And I have Bosun Obembe, an FX dealer at Access Bank. Good morning, Bosun. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, Christmas is just around the corner, and I'm sure that Nigerians in diaspora will be sending money home. Now, I'd just like to find out, how has activity been in that space, given the CBN's new Forex remittance policy? What has he been like?
Okay, so the policy that CBN has brought out is the objective is to actually ensure transparency in these particularly in the private market. And on Thursday, CBN brought out another directive, and on Friday there was another directive as well for banks to actually close Naira account of the high MTOs. So essentially, CBN wants the actual dollar remittance to actually go to the beneficiary in that same currency, that is USD. So by having that, you have a lot of dollar in the system, which will actually force the exchange rate in the parallel market to actually come down. So we've been seeing a lot of traction. We've been seeing a lot of because of the demand. You know, this is December period, so many people are actually importing a lot of things. So I'm sure by next year, by first quarter next year, we'll start to see the result. Currently, we've seen the result. You see in the investor and exporter window, CBN has sustained its intervention. CBN has been selling funds to the foreign portfolio investor, and they've been selling even to the local all through last week and 2 weeks ago. CBN sold about $250 million. So even the parallel market, we've been seeing it at just 470, and we expect it to actually come down to around maybe like 450 when we start to see more the impact of this the policy on remittance that CBN has actually brought out. So it's been a good one for the market. It's actually reduced some kind of pressure that we witnessed in the area in the prior market, and the rate went as high as 500.
All right, Boston, thank you for your input on the program. Do have a lovely week ahead. Boston Obembe is an FX dealer at Access Bank. Chimi, I'm sure you were happy to hear that the dollar has come down to 450 at the parallel market.
Yes, I'm happy. But you talked about diaspora remittances, people sending money. Oh, perhaps I would need some money. Yeah, I think
you'll be getting it soon, hopefully.
I need some money for this Christmas. Right, thank you very much, Eddie. Well, it's on that note that we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.